Welcome everyone on lecture 3 of the NPTEL course Climate Change and Extreme Events. In the previous lecture, we have already discussed about what is exactly weather and how you can differentiate between, let's say, weather and climate. What are their different types of examples we have also discussed. Then we have in the lecture 2, we have primarily talked about what is exactly climate change, how we can define it, and what are those different processes which are responsible for climate change, or when we are saying climate change, which processes we are exactly referring to. We have also talked about when we are saying climate change or temperature rise, or let's say rise of CO2, we have also compared previous time scale or the for example different types of the temperature rise and fall during the past several thousand years, and then we have compared if we are saying that there is a sharp rise in the temperature which is basically attributed to primarily because of some sort of human activities or anthropogenic disturbances like that. So this is so far we have already covered. We have also covered for example what are their impacts of climate change, and we have also covered what are those strategies which can basically overcome the problem of climate change in different regions around the globe. In today's lecture, we will primarily talk about what is exactly climate extremes when we are saying, and how we can basically define those these extremes, as well as what is their types, and we will also look into it different types of the global impact caused by these extreme events across different worlds. So in this particular lecture, I just summarized. So in this lecture, we will go through the definition of the climate extremes and their characteristics. We will also identify different types of climate extremes, as well as different understanding of the global distribution of these extreme events, as well as the drivers of climate extremes. We will also explore when these societal and environmental impacts of climate extremes on different regions or different societal implications because of the frequency and magnitude of these climatic extremes because of the warming climate and all that. So this is the overall learning objectives of this today's this lecture. So what is exactly climate extremes? How we can define it? Climate extremes. Climate extremes are defined as significant when we say the deviation from the average climate behavior of one particular region. That is what basically we can define as a climate extremes, which is basically a deviation from the average behavior of one particular regions. This can include some of the rare events. This can also include some sort of very intense events where the magnitude and the is very high, and the frequency is also the occurrence of or probability of occurrences of these events are low, but when we are talking about magnitudes are very high. So as I just discussed, these key characteristics of these climate extremes are rare occurrences which has low probability of occurrence at different places. For example, if you talk about different types of extreme meteorological events. So extremes, when I am saying that these are the events where we have a higher magnitude and the occurrence of the probability is very, very low. For example, if you talk about the flood of 100 years flood, which occurs one times a higher magnitude of floods in 100 years or like that. So this is how basically we can define the probability and the magnitude of extreme events which happened at different places because of different types of climate change as well. So because of these climate extremes, there is a higher chances of impact on society and ecosystem, because if you talk about, let's say, different types of climate extreme events, for example floods and droughts, these has a very significant effect on socioeconomic conditions at one particular place. If you talk about, let's say fire or wildfire, or let's say forest fire, those events are also, you know, sometimes very rare, but when it occurred, it basically disrupt the whole biodiversity of that particular region as well. You can also talk about, you know, several types of other extremes, for example, tropical cyclones or extratropical cyclones or like that. So, these has a very significant impacts on different strata of society, as well as they can also rupture the economic conditions of one particular locations as well. So, as just I described, there are, for example, heat waves, floods, droughts and cyclones. These are some of these, you know, climate extreme events which can cause very significant damage to the different parts of the world. When I am saying, you know, the climate is the significant deviation from the average climate behavior, what do I mean by this? So, if you look at this particular figure, we can see that so this is the solid line basically represents the older climatic conditions, and then if you look at the dotted line here, it represents the new climatic conditions like that. So, if you look at in this particular figure, it tells that the climatic behavior of one particular region has been significantly, you know, shifted towards the positive side. So, this kind of the change in the behavior of the climatic system is called shift in the mean. Here in the y axis we are plotting the probability of occurrences, and the x axis we are saying different types of, you know, the values or the climatic values for, let us say, precipitation, temperature, etc., meteorological values like that. Or here we are talking about particularly the temperature. So, when you are saying there is a shift in the mean, here it suggests that there is a significant higher probability of occurrence of, let us say, higher extreme hot weather compared to the original climatic conditions. And there is also possible that there is a less occurrences of, let us say, the cold weather events, because the probability has been decreased in the new climatic, you know, regime or shifted climatic regimes like that. So, this is one example which tells about, if I am saying the shift in the climate behavior in the mean direction or in the mean behavior of the so it basically shifts the mean as well as the positive side or the higher magnitude side. The probability of occurrences of these events has been increased. On the other hand, let us say if you say the original climate condition was like this, but now the variability has been increased in the system, which means now the occurrences of the mean or let us say the median line here has been decreased. But if you look at the extreme ends, for example, positive ends here the probability of occurrence has been increased. On the similar side, if you look at the left hand side, it is also showing that the probability of occurrence of extreme cold weather has been increased, and here extreme hot weather has been also increased the probability of occurrences. So, this is called increased variability in the system that basically alters the climatic conditions of one particular region. You can also talk about there is a change in the symmetry of the behavior of climatic system. For example, this was the original climatic condition, and then it has been little bit shifted. The median line has been shifted towards the negative side, and whole symmetry has been changed of this probability density functions, which also suggests that the median behavior has been shifted, has been changed. Here the hot extreme has become little bit more frequent compared to the original climatic conditions, and there is also there is significant change in the lower magnitude events as well. So, this is called these are the some of the example which tells about, if you am saying that there is a climate change in the system, how we can assess them, or let us say how we can quantitatively calculate what is the exact change in the behavior of the system of one particular regions like that. These are the some of the types of climatic extremes which has been occurred because of phenomena of climate change at different parts of the world. You can divide the climate extremes into three different parts. For example, you can say there is a meteorological events where you can basically classify different types of extremes, for example, cold waves, heat waves or extreme rainfall events. You can also talk about, let us say, climatological extremes, where we can talk about wildfire or hurricane or cyclones. You can also classify into different types of another extremes, for example, hydrological extremes where we have floods and droughts and like that, these kind of events. So, these are the different types of extremes which can occur across the world and which is basically more frequent when we are saying in context of climate change. So, now I will go into one by one different types of extreme events. I will brief you about what is exactly these different types of extreme events are, and then we will give you some example on and their impacts as well. For example, the first extreme events, if you compare heat waves and cold waves, you all heard the story that heat waves has been increased, the frequency, the magnitude, the severity of heat waves has been increased as we year by year. So, what is exactly heat waves? It is basically the prolonged period of excessive high temperature which causes high pressure system and which basically threaten the urban heat island or creates the urban heat island effect, or basically significant poses impacts on health risk, agricultural losses in different parts of the world. So, heat wave generally where the temperature crosses a certain threshold, and if it is crosses the certain thresholds and it is basically maintains at the certain threshold for a very long period of time, that is basically we can classify it as a heat waves events for that particular region. Similarly, on the opposite side, we can also say the cold waves, where the extended period of extreme cold events in a particular region. So, basically when you can say the one particular threshold where the temperature goes below that and for some extended period, then that is basically called, we can say, the cold waves event at a particular locations like that. It is caused by primarily the polar vortex shift, jet stream anomalies, and it has also a significant impact on infrastructure damage on particularly on the energy demand side as well. So, these are the two the extreme events which are very common because of the change in the climatic behavior at different regional scale as well as global scale as well. So, this is one of the example which tells you about the distribution of the heat waves and cold waves across different part of the world. This is the extreme surface temperature in 2024 data. Here you can see that most of the tropical regions and the regions which are near to the equator and like that, here we see that there is a strong occurrences of the heat waves event. Even if you look at the whole map, here the higher probability of occurrence of extreme temperature or heat wave events across the whole world like that, or warming of these regions. We can also see several regions where we have coolest or basically the temperature has been decreased like that. So, this is some of the data sets which are there, which can be used to classify these two different types of extreme events. Then you have, let us say, the hydrological extreme. For example, you can say floods and droughts. So, floods are basically those events when the river generally crosses the the water surface to the floodplain or to the neighboring region and basically inundate a substantial part of the region which is very close to the river system. That is basically called riverine flood. There is also we can say urban flooding, where we have very intense amount of rainfall and that basically creates a higher inundation in some part of the urban areas. That is called urban flooding in some part of the regions as well. So, floods can be defined as flash floods, as we just described the river floods. There is also called coastal floods, where we have flooding events occurs near the coastal areas. Flash floods is generally those events which occurs in very short period of time, in hourly or some sub-hourly duration or sub-daily durations, which basically occurs very quickly, where the river discharge reaches the peak very very steeply, and therefore, it creates a very significant damages to the settlements or the ecosystem or the river channel or whatever the infrastructure we have created there. So, that is called flash floods. So, primary reason of floodings are basically heavy rainfall or sometimes snow melt, which also saturate the ground surface, and therefore, subsequent amount of heavy rainfall events can create a flood events. Storm surges can also create flood events in some regions. The impacts of these flooding events are primarily the infrastructural damages and loss of life, which basically creates a socio-economic damages of one particular regions like that. Then another extreme events are hydrological extreme events are drought events. Drought events, if you compare to the flood events, are slightly elongated or extended period of extreme events, where they occurred for, let us say, more than 20 days, more than 30 days like that, and that basically can be defined into different types of drought events. For example, it can be meteorological drought event, it can be agricultural drought event, it can be hydrological drought events as well. So, meteorological droughts event are generally caused by low amount of rainfall. Hydrological droughts events are basically classified as when we have low amount of surface water, either the lake surface or river or some surface water bodies. And agricultural drought events when we have lower amount of soil moisture, water in subsurface, and therefore it basically creates a significant damage to the crop productivity of some certain region. So, the major causes of these drought events are low precipitation, high evaporation, and or maybe both the events are happening or subsequent manner. The impacts, as I just discussed, these are basically cause the water scarcity, crop failures and all in different parts of the world. Then you have another type of extremes which is called cyclones and hurricanes. We can classify as a tropical cyclones and extratropical cyclones. So, these are the cyclones where tropical cyclones particularly developed because of low pressure system formed over the warm ocean water, which can be categorized as hurricane, typhoon, cyclones, regional, some regional names as well. These tropical cyclones can be can impact the damages of different parts or basically some storm surges or flooding in coastal regions as well. In the extratropical cyclones occurs in primarily in the mid latitude region, which are associated with the frontal system and which can basically impact the high winds, heavy precipitation in some part of the region. So, these are the some of the representation of tropical cyclones and extratropical cyclones, which basically suggest that how tropical cyclones forms. So, it goes through the depression, then deep depression, then cyclonic storm of one particular region, and therefore, it reaches the wind velocity, wind speed at around 39 to 54 miles per hour. Then you have also different types of extratropical cyclones, which is basically occurring in the mid latitude regions as well. So, these are the some examples of climate extreme events, which is basically affecting the overall socio-economic or population or biodiversity of one particular different parts of the world, for example. This is the map which shows that the global distribution of climate extremes across whole world. So, there are some regional trends. It is possible that there are few extreme events are common in one particular region. There are few other types of extreme events are common in some other part of the regions. For example, heat waves are very common in Europe, North America and Australia, these regions. Floods are very common in, let us say, South Asia and Southeast Asian region. Droughts are very common in, let us say, sub-Saharan Africa or Australia or US or Midwest, like these regions as well. So, these are the some of the trends, regional trends, which suggest that the regions where we have different types of climatic extremes occurrences, and these are the drivers which suggest that how these extreme events are driving in one different different type places as well. So, for example, ENSO, that is called El Nino Southern Oscillation, is one of the driver of some of the climatic extremes. For example, Arctic amplifications also can cause some types of extreme events in different parts of the world. You can also have a human induced climate change primarily because of the GHG emission, and therefore, these are basically responsible for extreme events or climatic extremes in different parts of the world as well. So, this is the map which suggests that how different parts of the world has been affected by different climatic extremes. For example, flooding, heat stress, water stress, wildfire, hurricane and typhoon, and sea level rise. So, these are the some of the distribution of the extreme events across whole region. For example, if you talk about flooding, most of the region of Southeastern Asia, including India and Southeastern countries like that. Also the higher latitude region in some part of the America and some part of the this particular region also are affected by flooding events. Similarly, you can also see that water stress and heat stress has a significant dominance in this particular region. Therefore, these types of climatic extremes are more prevalent or more dominated in these particular regions like that. So, this is basically tells this particular figure tells about how we can distribute, or we can understand about what is the overall distribution of climatic extremes across whole world. So, we have so far talked about what is exactly climatic extremes, how we can define the climatic extremes, what are the types of climatic extremes, or what are the global distribution of the climatic extremes. Now, the important question is, what is the societal impact of these climatic extremes? This can be defined in three different parameters. One is your migration. For example, when you have more climate extreme conditions in one particular region, then there we have observed there is a climate refugees. People are migrating from one place to the another place to get a safer place or safer areas, so that they can settle down there to a little bit reduce the causes of these climate extremes. So, that is basically the displacement which occurs due to these disasters, which is basically called migrations because of the climate extreme events. Then there is a health issues which are associated with the climate extremes. For example, there are heat related illness, there are malnutrition because of the low crop yield, crop agricultural loss because of the different climate extreme conditions. Then you have also the waterborne diseases. Let us say you have a very heavy flooding events occurs in one particular region, and water stays there for many days. Therefore, it can leads to some sort of waterborne disease in those areas as well. So, that has also a health disease or health related problems which is caused by climatic extreme conditions. Then you have also, let us say, economical damages caused by climate extremes. For example, infrastructure damage, productivity loss, agricultural productivity loss because of these. So, combining all these three factors, which is basically we called socio-economic impacts of climate extremes of different regions and across the world. There are several environmental impacts of climate extremes as well. For example, we can say classify them into three, 2 or 3 points. One is the ecosystem. We can see that there is a coral bleaching, forest, dieback, or basically effect on forest region. Biodiversity loss, for example, habitat loss or species extension. There is a feedback loops also associated with the climate extremes. For example, when you have more climate extreme conditions, the permafrost thaw and releasing the methane, that can leads to more the global warming conditions because of these feedback loops which occurs because of these extreme climate conditions in different parts of the world as well. So, these are some of the environmental impacts which is caused by climate extreme events, which is basically we have discussed in this particular slide. Then the major question is, what is the trends and projections of these climate extreme events which we have observed historically. So, if you look at this particular graph, it shows that the frequency and the intensity of the extreme events has been continuously increasing since 1980s. This is the data up to 2020, and here if you see that it in left side of y axis, it shows as number of billion-dollar disaster events, and that is the total sum of all these disaster costs like that. So, here it is classified into different types of disaster: wildfire, winter storms, freezes, droughts, floods, and all other types of extreme events. So, if you look at here, it is continuously showing that the cost of these extreme events are continuously rising, and therefore, it has basically affected significantly the socio-economic conditions of global economy. For example, if you look at the 2020 bar of the aggregated the disaster cost, it is the one of the highest disaster we have observed so far based on this particular graph. So, which basically suggesting that the increasing frequency and intensity of extreme events has significantly creating a disaster cost, or basically impacting the economy of different parts of the world, and therefore, it is basically very important to understand about how these extreme events are likely to behave in the future scenarios as well. So, the future projections are also very interesting study or region of interest, where we are talking about, let us say, climate extremes, how we can do the future projections to get an idea about what is the intensity of heat waves in the future climatic scenarios, how the heavier rainfall events are likely to be occur in one particular part of the world, what is the status of, let us say, drought and drought conditions in different parts of the world, what is their intensity, what is their duration, what is their deficit, for example, what is their regional variability overall, depends on the climate models or different types of mathematical representation of the climate system of different regions around the globe. Then when we are talking about climate extremes, we have to also talk about what is the basic preparedness, or basically mitigation steps for impact of climate extremes. So, there is three parameters which we can again classify: the mitigations, which is longer term, where we are primarily focusing on reducing the greenhouse gases emission, reforestation, etc. Or maybe we can talk about, let us say, preparedness, where we are particularly focusing on, let us say, how to set up the early warning system in one particular regions, where these regions are significantly affected by climate extremes conditions. And what is the disaster planning? Let us say if some flooding events occurs in a one particular region, how we are prepared for that particular disaster in that particular regions, like that. So, that is basically disaster planning, how we can reduce the cost of that particular climate extremes in that particular regions, like that. Then we are also talking about, let us say, adaptation, how the infrastructures are resilient towards different types of climate extremes, for example, heat waves, flooding events, or etc., these kind of different types of events, or what is the overall sustainable water management of different regions, how we can basically have a proper water management system. Let us say if we have more drought events or heat waves events, when it is basically threatens the overall water availability of one particular regions, like that. So, therefore, when we are talking about mitigating the impacts of climate extremes, we have to also talk about what is the mitigation steps, what is the preparedness level, and what is the adaptation process or steps further, so that we can mitigate or reduce the impact of climate extremes in one particular regions. So, overall in this particular lecture, we have basically talked about what is exactly climate extremes and how we can define them based on different types of climatic models. We have talked about change in the symmetry, change in the mean behavior, change in the variability, like that. Then we have also talked about what is the different types of climate extremes in this lecture and their drivers, which is critical for mitigation, preparedness and adaptation purposes. Then we have also talked about what is their impact of different types of climate extremes on global regions and how they are costing different types of socioeconomic conditions around the globe. Then we have also talked about what is the mitigation and adaptation steps to reduce the impacts of these climatic extremes across the world as well. So, based on this particular lecture, you can basically explore further what is the climate extremes in your region and what is their impacts, and you can also gather the data, let us say historical rainfall or flood data or drought data, and you can see whether there is a trend or whether there is a particular region which are basically significantly affected by any particular type of climate extremes, which can be you can also do that. Thank you so much for this for attention for this particular lecture. In the next lecture, we will primarily talk about what is exactly heat waves and cold spells, how we can define these two different types of extremes in a very detailed manner. Thank you so much for attention.